primary way we're identifying the drivers is with their hard copy CDL. It's a primary ID document. And then carriers, we're going to be looking at a variety of different ways to make sure we're properly identifying the carrier. And some of those are listed up there. One of the things I'll tell you that's in the works for drivers, and I'm old school, so and I'm sure there's a few of you out there that really have a hard time. For instance, right here next to me, I got a hard copy of the regulations. Okay. Yeah, I know it's available online, but I'm old school. I want a hard copy in front of me. Well, something that's in the works and it's being piloted in some states now is an electronic driver's license. Now, when they first come out with that idea, I thought, wow, that's really not a good idea. But the more I've learned about it, the more it has some good application with technology today, because one of the things it will do is it allows the driver to better protect their ID. If I pull my driver's license out and give it to you, and you happen to take a picture of it, happens to get captured somehow, you've got all the information you need to steal my identity. With an electronic version, for instance, if you somebody needed to see your ID because you're going into a bar and they wanted to make sure you're 21 or over, you could just show them your picture on your smartphone along with your full name and your date of birth, and that's all the information they need. They don't need anything else. If you're dealing with an enforcement person and they need more, you can give them more. And so that's actually in the works out there, and I think it has some pretty good promise to kind of revolutionize where we're going with things digitally and electronically. One of the things that we tell all of our inspectors when they go through training is that all violations should be noted on the inspection. And again, I showed you those schematics and how we standardize the inspection process. Citations and civil penalties are one thing that vary by state, and we don't really have any control over that because we are a nation of states, and they're going to do their own things. And as you all well know out there, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction how well that or how different that is. Our CVSA inspection decals, when you pass a level 1, a level 5, or a level 6 inspection, these decals are put on that passenger side bottom corner of the window. And there's 3 colors, a green, yellow, orange, and white, that correspond with the quarters. So how do we know what month it was put on? Well, we look at the corners. In the first month of the quarter, we tear off both corners of the sticker. The middle month or second month of the quarter, we just do the right corner. And then if it's the third month of the quarter, it's a full sticker. So we can look at the number on the sticker, the color, and know, okay, it was put on this year. For instance, there's a 1 on there for 21. And we look on there, okay, that was just put on in 21. It's green, it was put on the first quarter. And then I'd look at the corners to see which month it was put on. Pretty simple once you figure out how it works. So what are some of the most cited hazmat violations? Now, a couple things I'm going to tell you about this data before I go through it. One, these codes are actually computer codes. I pulled it right from FMCSA's data on their website. So that first one, for instance, 177-834A, well, if you look that up, you're not going to find that large A in there. Actually, the way it would be in the regulations, it's a small a with parentheses around it, but that's why these are different. It's because these were pulled out of that computer data from FMCSA's website. The other thing I will tell you is this is data from this fiscal year. I just pulled since October 1. So this is about 5 months of data. I pulled it last week. So we're probably looking through February, but looking at prior data, some of these things change, these violations change position, but not by much. These first couple have been pretty consistent for years. So the first one, I'll talk more about this in a minute. And this is a real concern, 177-834A, the package not secure in vehicle. It's the most cited hazmat violation. It's frustrating for industry, and I'll tell you, it's frustrating for enforcement as well. We've done things, and for instance, in our out of service criteria, to put a statement in there that if it's not movement sufficient to affect package integrity, then it shouldn't be run up as a violation. It's gotten better, but we still have issues with it. It's just, and one of the things that I've even asked PHMSA to do, the federal agency that regulates hazmat, is why don't you put some videos together to show enforcement industry both what you consider a secure load of hazardous material. It's something that they haven't done yet. So if any of you get a chance to put that bug in their ear, I think it would be a really good idea for everybody. But I'll talk about that code again in a minute. The next one, 107-620B, no copy of the DOT hazmat registration. The problem with that is people just forget to put anything in there at all, or they don't update the number if they happen to put the number on their shipping paper. So really, there's two options here. You can have a copy of that DOT hazmat registration in the vehicle, or it needs to be a current copy, or you can put the current number somewhere else. You can have it on another document. A lot of companies out there will actually put it on their shipping paper. If it goes on the shipping paper, make sure when you update that number gets updated. Shipping paper accessibility, that's another big one. It needs to be, the shipping paper needs to be within the driver's reach when he's seatbelted in. Regulations say lap belt, or it needs to be visible, immediately visible to somebody coming into the cab, or it can be in the driver's door. I've seen drivers get them out of briefcases in the sleeper berth, briefcases on the seat, metal folders on the floor on the passenger side that aren't marked hazmat shipping papers or anything like that. So that's one really what comes down to when you train the drivers, you need to really, beat that into them that, hey, make sure this is accessible the way it's supposed to be accessible. The next one, no or improper shipping papers, and that could be either the information on the shipping paper is incomplete or wrong, or they just don't have shipping papers. The vehicle not placarded is required is the next one. And that could be a number of things as well, but it's the bottom line, it's a placard violation. Number 6, placard damaged, deteriorated, obscured. This is another one that I know the industry, especially red placards, you've got a problem with, and that's getting violations for faded placards. What's a faded placard? Well, we've actually been working on that. I've been working with Pantone, the color company that's referenced in the regulations, and some industry folks, some of our associate members, and some of our enforcement and federal members. And Pantone has developed a tool. I'm working with PHMSA. I'm hoping to get some funding to get this tool out there so we can pilot it. But it'd be a tool that the industry folks, the enforcement folks could use. You hold it up next to a placard. It's got the Pantone color differences that are mentioned in the regulations. You can say, okay, yeah, the placard, it's good or not good. So is the placard within color tolerance? Because I can show you 2 new red placards that the color tone looks different. And it's like, well, why are they different reds? Well, if it's within Pantone's color, it's okay. But how do you know that? And so that's the frustrating part. So anyway, that's an issue that we're working on. I'm hoping within this next year, I can finally have a solution for everybody on that particular problem. No placards or marking when required. That code right there covers both placards and marking, that 177.823A. So that could be either one. And the bottom 2 are emergency response information. Maintenance and accessibility is 9, and then offer transport without. So they don't have emergency response information with 10. With 9, they might have it, but it's not maintained like it's supposed to be. And it's the same as a shipping paper. It doesn't have to be with the shipping paper, but it's got to be within the driver's reach and readily visible to somebody coming in the cab or in the door. Now, the way I found these propane cargo tank violations, I had to look at the top 100 violations. The numbers you see in parentheses there are where they ranked currently in the data when I pulled it. So like that first one was number 14. The second one was number 17. But that first one, failed to mark manual remote shut-off device with emergency shut-off. That's applicable to all specification cargo tanks. So that's not just necessarily propane cargo tanks, but some of those violations I'm sure are attributed to propane tanks. So that was the first one I found. Cargo tank or inspection markings. So the required test markings on the cargo tank are expired is typically what that one is for. Failure to test and inspect a specification cargo tank when due. That's very similar to that last one, except they're citing it under 407A and instead of the marking in 415. 177.834 J, manholes and valves not closed or leak free. I am going to go over an interpretation on that issue that's specific to propane cargo tanks. It's a question that comes up frequently. January, when we were doing training at our COMED conference that we had virtually, that issue came up again. And the information that I gave that all of you that are on here should be able to eventually get has the interpretations I'm going to go over on there in a copy of this presentation in PDF format. 172.302A is no ID number on bulk packaging, and this could be any bulk packaging, so it would include cargo tanks. Cargo tank not marked with the proper shipping name for gases. So if you've got a class 2 gas in a cargo tank, you got to have the proper shipping name on all 4 sides. The next one, MC338, marking the inlet and outlet markings. So liquid vapor spray fill, it's not marked correctly. The next one, discharge valve not closed during transportation. That goes with that last one I talked about, where we have an interpretation, and I'll talk about that for propane tanks. Improper transportation of class 2 gases. That last one, number 8, and this one, they're both in that section in part 177 that's specific to gases. And then the last one, 178.337, that would actually be -13 if you looked it up in the regulations. MC 331, supports and anchoring. That could be a couple things. One would be a crack, say, in the support for a cargo tank, or the anchoring would be we've got a bobtail and you've got the tank anchored to the frame. If any of those anchors are loose, that would be an issue in that case. So let me move on now. Let me talk about blocking and bracing. The problem that we have with blocking and bracing in the language and the regulation is relative motion between packages. And any of you that have loaded a commercial vehicle know that relative motion, I mean, when you secure a package in there good, you're going to get some movement. And when the vehicle moves, you're going to get some movement. And that's what people get hung up on. And that's the one thing we've tried to address in our out of service criteria is that, look, if there's a tiny bit of movement, that's fine. If it's not affecting package integrity and the package isn't going to fall over, that's fine. We've had a problem, and I think it's past now. I think we've been able to deal with it successfully, but we had a problem in one particular state, in one particular county, where there was a weigh station, and I won't mention the state, where they were writing up violations that frankly weren't good violations, and they had a prosecuting attorney that was prosecuting them, and we had to work with them and try to get him to, knock it off, because these are not good violations. And we try to head off problems like that. This particular one for cargo tanks, 177.834J, in particular paragraph 2, when we're talking about all valves and other closures in the liquid discharge systems are closed and free of leaks. Again, for propane delivery trucks in particular, I'll talk about that interpretation and what it says, but you will have a copy of that as well, and the information that's available from this session. When the inspection's all done, the inspector should complete the inspection and provide a copy of the inspection to the driver. Most inspections now are done on computers, so you should get a computer-generated copy, a little easier to read. Some inspections are still handwritten, so those are going to be entered manually, and a lot of your level 3, which are the driver-only ones, are still entered manually. But we really like everything to be done on a computer because the data is better and there's fewer mistakes. The mistakes affect everybody and give us bad data, and we don't want that. So we're really trying to push everyone doing roadside inspections to start using computers. But again, you're still going to see some handwritten ones out there. So a couple of things specific to class 2 gases, propane in particular, I'm going to talk about here. Special provision 19 and special provision N95 I want to talk about. A couple of sections in 173.315, both paragraphs J and K. And then 172.331 marking. I'm going to talk about when that applies. And then again, I'm going to list those interpretations for you that are specific to you guys as well. You'll find special provision 19, and if I counted them all, I went through the table a couple of times. I think this is the only gases they apply it to. If anybody's aware of any I missed, let me know. But these 6 gases, you'll find special provision 19 in column 7. Well, what does it say? It says, for domestic transportation only, the identification number UN 1075 may be used in place of the identification number specified in column 4 of the 172.101 table. The identification number must be consistent on package markings, shipping papers, and emergency response information. Recently, I've been made aware of an issue with this, and I've always gotten questions about this occasionally, but it's most common with propane. And if I go back a slide, you'll see the UN number for propane is 1978. Well, what happens now, because computers and looking up things with the regulations, it's easier to look up things in some aspects. What happens is you'll get a roadside inspector. A lot of times they're a younger roadside inspector that will look up, they'll stop your driver. You get a shipping paper, or the inspector does, it says propane on it, UN 1075, which is fine. The truck says propane on all 4 sides. The ID numbers on the placards say 1075. He didn't look up propane. He didn't look up what was on your shipping paper, because if he did, he'd go over to column 7 and he'd see special provision 19. Instead, they're looking it up by the UN number, but if you look up UN 1075, you're going to see you can have petroleum gases liquefied. A liquefied petroleum gas is a proper shipping name, but you don't have special provision 19 listed. So recently I've heard of a few situations where you've been written violations that are not good violations or bad violations because inspectors are looking stuff up like this. So I bring this up because this would be something good to train your drivers on, special provision 19, and why you can use UN 1075. I would just educate your drivers on that so that when that happens, they can say, oh no, look up propane, look up special provision 19 from column 7, and it's going to tell you that I can use UN 1075 as an ID number for propane domestically. I just have to be consistent between my shipping papers, my marking on my cargo tank, and my cylinders, and on my emergency response information. So just something I was made aware of recently. And then special provision N95, it applies to those 20-pound barbecue grill cylinders typically. I mean, there's more cylinders out there other than those 4BA 240s that the 20-pounders than just, I said, for instance, I got a 30-pounder, but the 20-pounders is what we're typically talking about here. And these are the ones that are used for recycle. This used to be a special permit that was put into the regulations, and there's still some special permits out there, and I'll talk about one of them. But a couple of requirements that it's, so this, you pick these up for recycle, and there's no markings or labels on them. And so there doesn't have to be under this special provision. If one, you're putting them in a transport vehicle that's placarded in accordance with Part 172. So you've got placards on the vehicle, and then the shipping papers need to be updated. So every time you drop off and pick up cylinders, update the shipping papers, and then it applies to private or contract carrier, and you need to be picking them up for reconditioning, reuse, or disposal. So the two problems we see most commonly with this are the shipping papers are not up to date. So the driver's not going in every time and saying, marking off, okay, I got this many full left now, I picked up this many that are empty. So that inventory is not complete, or the cylinders are not secured in the vehicle. And I've seen some of these where there's absolutely no securement at all. So and that's a problem. So those are just the two common things we see with that special provision. Another question that comes up a lot is on those consumer storage tanks that are going to private residences that are getting delivered there. And that's addressed in 173.315J. There's two paragraphs in there. The first one is those that are headed out to the residence. That's the one I have on the slide here. And it can be charged to 5% or less. And it's got to be built to ASME code. It's got to have a safety release device on it that's built to that the NFPA 58 standard. And it's got to be secured and the valves and fittings protected. The biggest thing that happens occasionally with these is on the way out there, sometimes they try to fill them full. And there is an exception, I think, for in the third paragraph, I think it's 125 gallons or less it can be, but these bigger ones, so you've got a 400-gallon one. Well, that's at 5%. It's all it can be filled. The other question I get a lot is, does the tank itself have to be marked and placarded or labeled? And the answer is yes. And there's a couple of interpretations that address that I've made available here as well. The second paragraph is those that are headed back. So you're picking this up and you're taking it back to your closest premises. Again, you got to empty it. It can't be more than 5%. It can't be a tank that exceeds 500 gallons water capacity. And again, there's a couple of things that you've got to remember here. It's a one-way only from the consumer premises to the container owner's nearest facility. It's got to be completely within the envelope of the vehicle, so no overhang in this case. The tank has to fit in the vehicle completely, and there can't be any weight on the legs. It's got to be in a cradle or somehow blocked and braced securely so that those legs aren't on the ground. And those issues right there, especially the weight on supporting legs, come up occasionally. The biggest problem overall we find with these is there's no markings, placards, or labels on that tank. I realize it's a pain. The companies I've seen that do it the most actually will just put a magnetic placard with an ID number on both sides, because you only got to have it on two sides because of the size of these. There's a few of these running around. I just wanted to mention this briefly. Those non-spec cargo tanks that are allowed by 315K, they're getting older now. They had to be in use for LPG prior to January 1, 81. They had to be used in a state that allowed them to be used. The one issue that I've seen with these is I've had carriers that try to move them from state to state, and one, PHMSA says you shouldn't be doing that. Two, if you move them into a state that never allowed them, now you've got an unauthorized package in there. So if you happen to have any of these ASME tanks, just make sure they're being used properly and they were allowed by the jurisdiction they're in. Again, there's not very many out there, but they're there. This section right here, 172-331, deals with marking of bulk packaging other than portable tanks, cargo tanks, tank car tanks, and multi-unit tank car tanks. Bottom line is, this is where the marking requirements for those residential propane tanks fall. And in these interpretations here, and I've made these available. I'm just going to touch on them briefly and due to the time, but 02140 talks about the valves on a delivery truck, an MC331, a bobtail. Basically what it says is in the liquid discharge system, the internal valve's got to be closed, and at the end of your hose reel, it's got to be closed. And any valves in the liquid discharge in between there don't have to be closed. Vapor valves, there's another interpretation that put in here, but it says that your vapor valves are considered vents, is what PHMSA said in one interpretation. So you don't need to worry about closing all of those. The next two, 060223 and 060279, deal with those LPG consumer tanks and how they have to be marked, labeled, and or placarded at the roadside. And then that 090123, that deals with some questions, just clarifying the transportation of those consumer propane tanks in 173-315J. I think there's 4 or 5 questions that get answered there. The next two, 180121 and 180154, are interpretations that deal with the 10-year test and inspections on those NQT cargo tanks that are eligible for the 10-year internal visual and the 10-year pressure test. Answer some questions related to that in both of those. And then 180129 deals with that special permit, SP 13544. That special permit actually is very similar to that special provision N95. And this just clarifies basically that they don't have to be labeled and marked. And it's pretty clear in the special permit, but obviously somebody had an issue with that. And I provided a copy of that special permit along with this presentation and all of those interpretations. So the bottom line in summary is that, for us, it's safety. Bottom line is safety. And I know as an industry, you all feel the same way. You want to deliver your product and you want to do it safely. The roadside inspections are completed using a standardized process for the driver, equipment, cargo. We were built on these 3 standards: uniformity, reciprocity, and compatibility. That's what got us started 40 years ago, and that's what keeps us going today. COMED program, again, it brings enforcement industry together. We've been able to expand it using the community safety grant. There's been more opportunities out there for our industry members, and you can look at on our website for more training opportunities. And I am ready to entertain any questions.
All right. So folks, you can either raise your hand. So on the lower bar, you can see raise hand, or you can use the Q&A and I will read it for you. So as people are typing and finding the hand that's up, so I guess that brings me until we got somebody else. Would you like to join us again?
Absolutely, I can. I mean, we can talk. There's other topics that I could discuss. It's I could even probably do something on your earlier topic that I sit on training as well. And that's just a huge topic for all of you, and I understand that. That's a concern for everybody, but there's a lot of other things I could talk about our inspection process in more detail. I could talk about one of the regional training classes that I put together for, it was geared towards the enforcement side, but it was a 2-day class on gases. And I had some industry folks sit in on that training. They provided cylinders and stuff for us. I had a lot of industry involvement putting that together, and I could show you the way that I teach that and the way I get into the commonly shipped products. One of the industry folks in there from a large company said, after he sit through there, I like the way you do this. I'm going to change the way we train our drivers just based on the way you're doing this. So there's a lot of things like that I could do future trainings for you guys. And I enjoy interacting with the industry and doing this kind of stuff. So definitely would like to come back.
So we actually have another question, which is a good reminder. Let's see, How will this presentation be available for reference? And we have that question is if you logged in, you're an attendee, tomorrow I'll send up a follow-up email also asking, what would you like for Bill to talk about next? So that's how we'll get some great feedback to see what direction we are going in. And we have about 4 more minutes and we got another question. Can you haul 1,000-gallon tank back to our yard that has 5% in it? So customer said, I'm done, it's at 5%. Can they put it in? That's a great question.
That is a good question. And 173.315J doesn't allow you to do that. And Mike might have some data. So my opinion is about the only way you could do that is with a special permit that allowed you to do it. I think there may be some out there, but I'd have to research a little bit more to see. That's how it used to be done before, was there was special permits out there you could become a party to that allowed you to move them, and you had to move them the way the special permits, the specific requirements were in the special permit. So Mike, are you aware of any regulation out there other than a special permit that will allow them to do that?
It is under that special permit, and it must be completely in the bed of the truck. It can't hang over. It must be, like you said earlier, it must be properly braced. The legs can't be on the bed, and it must go directly back to the facility, and only one tank.
Yeah. So yeah, that's knowing if you're going to use those special permits, I'll just share with you right now, just to reiterate something that was said in the earlier session. If you're going to use a special permit to move tanks like that and you're party to it, make sure you train your drivers on it. I think that special permit, and you got to look in section 10 to be sure, but it will tell you in there whether it's got to be carrying the vehicle. And I think that one has to be carried with the vehicle. So it would definitely be something you'd want to train your drivers on.
Yes, it has to be with the vehicle. Yes.
And that's what I thought. Yeah. But section 10 and a special permit, if you want to look there, it will always tell you whether it's got to be carried in the vehicle. And most of them by highway do. There are very few exceptions. So if you've got a special permit, odds are it's supposed to be carried in the vehicle.
Perfect. All right. We answered all the questions. Your presentation will be emailed to you. And please expect that before you go home for the weekend, because it's Thursday. So happy Thursday. Bill, I just want to thank you so much for using VPE as the platform for sharing the information that we need to know. So thank you so much. And I will follow up on you once I get some good data back on what people want to learn more about.
Yeah, and my contact information is there on the slides. And I think it was put in the chat as well. You've got my email, you've got our website, you've got my phone number. If I can answer any questions or be of help to anybody, feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help support the industry as well.
Perfect. Well, we appreciate you. So thank you so much for stopping in for VPE Thursday. All right. Bye-bye.